All right, so this should be working on the live stream. I have to give it a couple seconds for the Instagram to catch up. Sorry, folks. I have to just kind of stall for a second or two. Usually takes like 30 seconds. Do. Okay, now I can click the go live button on Instagram, and we should be all synced up. Okay. So now we'll pick back right up on the Gladio book. So this is chapter 3, the Vatican Alliance. The Institute for Works of Religion, the IOR, commonly referred to as the Vatican Bank, is a privately held financial institution located inside Vatican City. So now I'm going to read through this section pretty slowly here because this is all, it's pretty heavy info. When you realize what the Vatican actually is, the Vatican, a lot of people on the left already know about the City of London and how it's this like small financial district inside the actual city that is called London. And so there's this other small little district called the City of London. And that has this entirely separate system of financial rules and regulations that are very advantageous for rich people and make it sort of this hub for all kinds of just like secrecy around huge amounts of money, kind of like Switzerland, Swiss banks, kind of like the Cayman Islands. So the Vatican and the Vatican Bank ends up being another hub for very private and very large amounts of money. So this will explain. This will go a long way to explain some of that. So, as I was saying, the Institute for Works of Religion, the IOR, commonly referred to as the Vatican Bank, is a privately held financial institution located inside Vatican City. Founded in 1942, the IOR's role is to safeguard and administer property intended for works of religion or charity. The bank accepts deposits only from top church officials and entities, according to Italian legal scholar Settimio Caridi. Sorry, I'm going to pause here and just make sure I got the chat pulled up. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Petrocel. Good morning, Jacob. Okay, so it is run by a president, but overseen by 5 cardinals who report directly to the Vatican and the Vatican Secretary of State. Because so little is known about the bank's daily operations and transactions, it has often been called the most secret bank in the world. And that's a quote. From Ari Jurish in Forbes, June 26, 2012. So created by Pope Pius XII and Bernardino Nogara on June 27, 1942, the Istituto per l'Opere di Religione, the IOR, commonly known as the Vatican Bank, is located within the Bastion of Nicholas V, a round tower that had been constructed in 1452 to ward off the threat of a Saracen invasion. The bank remains a sovereign financial agency within a sovereign state. So that's wild. It's literally built into this like ancient tower or hundreds of years old tower that was made to ward off an invasion. So it's like built into like a little tiny siege fortress. And it's a sovereign financial agency within a sovereign state. So like I was saying, like the City of London is its whole separate thing. It is an entity unto itself, without corporate or ecclesiastical ties to any other agency of the Holy See. As such, it cannot be compelled to redress wrongs, not even the most egregious violations of international law, nor can it be forced to release the source of any deposit. The bank resides under the direct jurisdiction of the Pope. He owns it, he controls it. So that's like, just this wild level of secrecy and lack of any kind of accountability for, again, large amounts of money. We're not even allowed or able to know how much. Let's see if anybody's in the chat. Good morning, people. Good to see you all. So again, this is the Gladio book, Unholy Alliance by Paul L. Williams. Swiss guards are stationed to guard the entrance to the bank, and the hermetically sealed bronze doors open only to select members of the Roman Curia, the governing body of the entire Roman Catholic Church. Nogara, who became the first president of the IOR, initiated a process of destroying all records of the bank's transactions, including deposits and investments, on a regular basis, so that its operations remain free and clear of public and private scrutiny. Anyone seeking information regarding the dealings of the bank, even of its corporate organization, discovers little more than empty file folders within the Vatican archives. Imagine that just being like a standard practice, that you just destroy all past records and everything, like it's insane. So I'm gonna add the ticker here, you guys. Someone in the chat was asking what book this is. Again, the Gladio book. This is Unholy Alliance. The what did they call it? The let's see what page I'm on. I'm on page 37. Unholy Alliance. The Unholy Alliance between the Vatican, the CIA, and the Mafia. And he leaves the Freemasons out of the title, but they're in there too. So the trails of paper flow among three separate and distinct boards of directors. One board consists of high-ranking cardinals, the second of international bankers, and the third of Vatican financial officials. But even these records cannot be subpoenaed for inspection. They remain confidential documents of the sovereign state that can only be examined by special permission from the Pope. Of course, the Holy See dutifully publishes financial reports on a yearly basis. The reports displaying gains and losses appear to be exhaustive. They contain meticulous records of the incomes and expenditures of every agency within the Holy See, except the IOR. The name of this agency never appears on any balance sheet. From all published records, this ecclesiastical entity is non-existent, and the Roman Catholic Church serves solely as a hand-to-mouth institution. So that's literally how they hide all their wealth. It's like what he's explaining. It's like if you balance the books by leaving out a huge amount of wealth by keeping it intentionally secret, and then at the end of the year you always balance out to have nothing as your organization, that's a great way to avoid any kind of taxes, accountability, to hide your wealth. So yeah, I put the link to the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@TCOTE-pod. Stands for True Crimes of the Empire. And in the link of the description, or in the description of all these live videos, is the links to all these documents if you want to read along. Or read ahead if you're ambitious. Investigators following the paper trail inevitably come to a dead end. All internal documents and external reports contain statements exempting the Vatican Bank or IOR from any ruling or standard of protocol. They are punctuated by such phrases as, quote, always leaving intact the special character of the IOR, or not including the IOR, or with full respect to the juridical status of the IOR. So they purposely insert this legal language to outright state that they are ignoring and totally leaving out anything that the IOR does, all of its sums of money, anything that may be there. So because of its clandestine workings, millions can be deposited into the IOR on a continuous basis and channeled into numbered Swiss bank accounts without the possibility of detection. It was the perfect place for the CIA and the Sicilian Mafia to launder the ill-gotten gains of the narcotics trade and for the Roman Church to fund its political mission. So again, just recapping, like in case you're just catching up, the Vatican, the CIA, and the Mafia all worked together to help Nazis, to shield them from any accountability during the end of World War II and afterwards, and then use them for clandestine militant guerrilla operations to assassinate labor organizers, communist organizers, communist leaders, and to overthrow elections. All of this in like Europe, Latin America. And according to Moneyval, the Anti-Money Laundering Committee of the Council of Europe, it remains one of the world's leading laundries for dirty cash under Pope Francis. So the next section is contributions from Uncle Sam. So in case anybody was like, hasn't everybody been talking about Pope Francis as if he was like some, or am I confusing it with a different one? But like, they're all bad is the point. Contributions from Uncle Sam. In 1947, Pope Pius XII was more than willing to allow black money to flow through his bank. The Truman administration already had funneled more than $350 million to the Holy See for economic relief and political payments. The Pope used these funds to reactivate the Christian Democratic Party, the CDP, which had been dismantled under the reign of Mussolini, and to establish 20,000 CDP cells throughout Italy. So now the Christian Democratic Party, that's not going to be a liberal party, like you may think the name would say. Like they're going to be far right. The Holy Father also obtained an additional $30 million from Truman's aid package to create Catholic Action, an organization to generate propaganda against the communists. See? American Cardinal Francis Spellman was now called upon to spearhead the Vatican-sponsored campaign to encourage Italian Americans to urge their deliveries in the old country to vote against, urge their relatives. I don't know why I read deliveries. To encourage Italian Americans to urge their relatives in the old country to vote against Togliatti and other communists. Quote, the fate of Italy depends upon the forthcoming election and the conflict between communism and Christianity, between slavery and freedom. Spellman wrote in a pamphlet that was distributed in Catholic parishes throughout the United States. The cardinal also arranged to bombard Italy with radio messages from American celebrities such as Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, and Gary Cooper, urging the people to rise up in support of Christian Democrats in order to check the growth of communism. So yeah, this is like a outspokenly, ardently anti-communist party, and this is who the mafia and the U.S. intelligence agencies and the Vatican all working together are supporting in every way possible. Legal, illegal, underground. Wild Bill's knighthood. So Wild Bill, this is Wild Bill Donovan, the CIA agent and maybe the head of the CIA, I can't remember, but definitely an integral part of the CIA and its early missions, its founding, its entire composition at the start. Like he purposely picked all these wealthy, waspy lawyer, Eastern, what do you call them? Like the elites. And that's who comprised the CIA. It's like those kind of people. Now it's like all Mormons, I guess. So Wild Bill's knighthood. Pius XII soon realized he would need millions more in cash from Uncle Sam, since 50% of the Italian people were now aligned with the PCI. So this is the Communist Party. He was no stranger to U.S. intelligence agents. At the close of the war, the Pope, along with Monsignor Giovanni Battista Montini, his Undersecretary of State, had worked with Dulles and the OSS to create the rat lines used to help Nazis escape Europe, something he viewed as an essential means to address the threat of communism. So yeah, that's like, it's not a coincidence that the West has continued to devolve into fascism. That's always what it was. That's always what it was built on. And that's always what they explicitly said was better than communism. The Western intelligence agencies, all the actual levers of power, always bend towards fascism because they are anti-communist. Several prominent Nazis, including Walter Rauff, who had led an extermination unit of the SS across Italy, still remained sheltered within Vatican City, ready to join in the struggle against the Red Menace. In 1945, the Pope had held private audiences with Wild Bill Donovan to discuss the implementation of Gladio and had decorated him as a crusader against communism with the Grand Cross of the Order of St. Sylvester, the oldest and most prestigious of papal knighthoods. That's crazy. Just for fighting communism, you get that kind of medal from the Pope. And people want to act like the Catholic Church isn't like wildly far right. I'm going to check the chat here on Instagram. Petrocel says, don't you love how Catholics follow the word of God by not doing it? People whitewashed Francis so much, they think he was like a queer savior. Yeah, and for some reason, I thought this book came out way before. Like, was there another Francis? Is he talking about a different one entirely? Partigiano Johnny says, this is wild. I was always so sad to watch the Italian immigrant neighborhoods go from rebellious to bootlicker. Yeah. Petrocel says, just a coincidence that all the anti-communists are like this. Yeah. So back to the book here. Now the Holy Father remained determined to do all in his worldly power to prevent the godless forces of communism from taking control of Rome, the holy and eternal city, including the spilling of blood. Crazy. So yeah, they're willing to get militant. They're willing to kill people. They hate communism. Just the idea of it getting any power in Europe, they hate it that much. So this next section, cash and candy. Let me see how long I've been going for. Okay, I got about like 6 more minutes on this book. Shibboleth says Christians are the devil, and he says, haven't heard WASP in a while. Yeah, I love using that term. White Anglo-Saxon Protestants, if you're not familiar. Cash and candy. In the months before the 1948 national election, the CIA dumped $65 million of its black money into the Vatican Bank. Much of the cash was hand-delivered in large suitcases by members of Luciano's syndicate, including clerics with affiliations to the Sicilian Mafia. The reception of this money by the Holy See was held in strictest confidentiality. One reason for the secrecy, as Cardinal Francis Spellman of New York later revealed, was that, quote, subversive groups in the United States would grasp this as a very effective pretense for attacking the United States government for having released money to the Vatican, even though indirectly conveyed. So basically, he's saying we can't let anybody who criticizes the U.S. government, imperialism, any of its like misdeeds abroad, we can't let any of those groups know about this money that the U.S. government is giving to the Vatican because they would point to that as a bad thing. Wild the level of just like flat out admission. But because everyone is just so steeped in anti-communist propaganda, you just mention like subversive groups, and people are like, oh, well, those must be the bad guys. It couldn't be the U.S. government and the Vatican. Those have to be the good guys. The heroin, which remained the source for the black money, continued to be supplied to the Sicilian mob by Schiaparelli, the Italian pharmaceutical giant. So remember from yesterday, we talked that they were starting off this whole operation by getting a huge shipment of very pure heroin from this pharmaceutical company, a legit pharmaceutical company in Italy, to then distribute in the black markets in like Harlem, inner cities, like anywhere, like jazz clubs specifically, to target people of color and get them addicted to heroin, which worked fantastically. And they sold the stuff like hotcakes. The drugs were received by a chain of businesses that had been set up in Palermo by Luciano and Don Carlo. These businesses included a candy factory, which produced chocolates that were filled with neither cherries nor cream, but nuggets of 100% pure smack. This stuff is so funny. Oh my god. Another company was a fruit export enterprise, which was of integral importance since the drugs continued to be shipped to Cuba in crates of oranges, half of which were made of wax and stuffed with pure heroin. Again, so just like comic book shit, like literally sending out crates of oranges, half of them are wax fake oranges filled with 100% pure heroin. And also you're using a candy factory to do the same thing. It's funny stuff. This next section here is Trafficante and the Teamsters. So yeah, also one of the big things I had mentioned like in the first couple pages was like how they used the mobsters to control the ports. You have to like have control over these ports and make sure your stuff is not getting inspected and turned over to the authorities. But also you don't want the port workers unionizing because then that cuts into all your profits. They could potentially like rat you out to the authorities if you have some kind of like up and up operation there. So the mobsters served two purposes. They both controlled the ports and kept the unions from forming or gaining any power whatsoever. So Trafficante and the Teamsters. In Cuba, Santo Trafficante and his family continued to cut the heroin with sugar before delivering it to distributors in New Orleans, Miami, and New York. The CIA established protected drug routes into these ports by developing close ties to the mafia-tainted International Longshoremen's Association, which remained under the thumb of Rosario Saro Mogovero. The movement of the product throughout the country was facilitated by Jimmy Hoffa and other leaders of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, working with mafia-owned trucking companies, including the Long Island Garment Trucking Company, which was run by John Ormento. This activity was not lost on Harry Anslinger, head of the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, the BNDD, who noted the sharp rise in supply of heroin in African American neighborhoods and the subsequent rise in addiction. So yeah, this is like, again, they literally created all of the, like opioid addiction issues and epidemics. The whole like war on drugs is a result of all this stuff. So hearing from informants that the drugs were coming from Luciano, he sent Charles Siragusa and other BNDD agents to Sicily, where they were ordered to haunt the deported gangsters' every move. So they had deported Luciano. The U.S. had made like a big media event saying like, "Oh, well, we're deporting back to Italy this notorious gangster, like the most well-known Italian mobster at the time." They had arrested him, and they said, "Well, now we're going to deport him back to Italy, even though he was never born in or from Italy originally." So they deport him and then use him. They don't like keep him in jail there. They deport him and then they use him to control the ports and for all their illegal activities. Hearing from informants that the drugs were coming from Luciano, he sent Charles Siragusa and other BNDD agents to Sicily, where they were ordered to haunt the deported gangsters' every move. It wasn't long before the agents caught Luciano with a half-ton of heroin being readied for shipment to Havana. Siragusa pressed for an arrest, but no action was taken by the Italian government or by the U.S. State Department. It's almost like he's integral to their operations and he's protected. Lucky's work in Sicily, the BNDD was informed, remained a matter of national security. It's so good. It's so good. I'm probably at 20 minutes, so let me switch over to the other book here. Yeah, I'm at exactly 20 minutes so far. So I'm going to bookmark that one here. Next section tomorrow will be Italian election tactics. So that'll be cool. Getting more into the Italian election of 1948 itself. Again, I always recommend people go back and check out one of the first Chapo episodes where Matt Christman did his Inebriated Past. It's his version of Drunk History. And he did a whole like hour long just uh, episode on Operation Gladio, all like the main points, and he talked a lot about the Italian election, how integral that was from keeping communism from gaining any kind of serious foothold in Europe, Western Europe. All right, so now I'm going to switch over to the other book. It's Western Marxism by Domenico Lacerdo, translated by Gabriel Rockhill. And so this is the one that's just like a scathing criticism of Western leftism, such as it exists. Before I get too into it, let me just check the chat here again. Yeah, Petrocell says, "We'll kill them to protect them from being killed by the communists." Yeah, it's always a funny logic of the West. Like you're saving people from communism by murdering them. Okay, so getting back into Western Marxism. Lacerda was always careful to avoid the idealist belief in anything like a perfect model, and he acknowledged the historical contingencies of class struggles. While noting ongoing battles within the Chinese Communist Party between a primarily nationalist current and one with broader communist ambitions, he did not purport to predict their outcome. Nonetheless, he had a deep understanding of the world historical significance of China's socialist project. It is aimed at overcoming what he called the quote, Great Divergence, or the international division of humanity between the labor aristocracy in the capitalist core and the workers and peasants in the colonial or semi-colonial periphery. China, he wrote, quote, is the country that more than any other is challenging the international division of labor imposed by colonialism and imperialism, and furthering the end of the Columbian epoch, a fact of enormous progressive historical significance. That's cool. That's a good term for it, too, the Columbian epoch, because you have this entire West that has been initiated and defined ever since by genocide of indigenous people and land theft. And to point to Columbus as the start of that, it's a pretty cool term. I like that. Although many Western Marxists unquestionably refer to China as authoritarian, capitalist, or even dictatorial, the PRC is a representative and consultatory, quote, whole process people's democracy, founded on socialist principles of party control of the state and the towering heights of the economy. There is indeed a capitalist sector and even a capitalist class stratum that has been allowed to operate in China, but it does not control the state or key pillars of the economy. Having emerged within a capitalist dominated world and faced with the very real choice of develop or die, this has been a tactical decision for socialist China. Its overarching strategy of building socialism, however, has been clearly outlined and maintained, according to Lacerdo, by the likes of Deng and now Xi Jinping. So yeah, he's also carefully explaining here how, so many Western Marxists make the mistake of saying that China deviated from socialism because of Deng Xiaoping with the opening up and reforms. But he's explaining how that was all part of the planned process. Like you can't combat purposeful underdevelopment by other countries unless you develop. And you couldn't do that at that point without entering into literally the world trade system. It's only idealists who think that there's some other way to do that. The PRC is by no means the only example of successful socialist state building projects, and much could be added here about other important examples, but it is certainly the largest and most visible. This is precisely why the capitalist powers, and in particular the United States, are intent on subordinating China and attempting to overthrow its leadership. In spite of all the propaganda that they pump out to demonize China, the power elite understands fully well the reality between its lies. The PRC is a very real threat to its imperial dominion. It refuses to return to the status of a colony or semi-colony, and it offers an alternative framework of international development that is more attractive to most of the world than the imperialist model imposed by the West. And that's another important point. It is literally more attractive. So many people just implicitly argue that China is imperialist, and it's because they kind of are of that Western delusion where they think imperialism is when big country. Imperialism is when you do any kind of trade, you do any kind of like resource mining or extraction from the global South even if you are just like paying for it, even if you are not maintaining military bases, overthrowing their governments, installing comprador, like entire classes of compradors in all the official positions so that you can control their trade and their government. China's not doing any of those things that the West has been doing for hundreds of years. It does not have any military bases to do any of those things or enforce it. It's literally providing a win-win situation and an alternative, and then people still accuse them of being imperialist by doing this. It literally just does not make any sense. Petrocell says, "Why don't we just start with our ideal communism?" Yeah, exactly. Like every global South country is supposed to just languish in poverty, according to both the idealist leftists, like the left comms, the ultras, but also like the neoconservatives. Like they both believe the same thing, which is that socialism and communism equals poverty. And Schivel says, "Don't forget those Dutch rat bastards who lent Columbus the ships and crew." Yeah. And he also says, "Capitalism works when it's ran by the workers, just like democracy works when it's ran by the people." Yeah, I mean, if you even want to call it capitalism, it's like if it's not run by the capitalists, why would it be capitalism anymore? Production run by the workers. It sounds like socialism to me. So this next section is Class Struggle in Theory from Lenin to Lacerdo. Socialism or barbaric imperialism with an increasing risk of human annihilation. This is the basic choice that humanity faces in the early 21st century, when nuclear war and complete ecological collapse are imminent possibilities. The Western Marxists, as Lacerdo predicted, have continued their practice of gesturing toward a magical beyond while pursuing the terrestrial task of advancing their careers, opposing socialism in the real world and, in numerous instances, openly supporting imperialism, as in Zizek's fulsome support for the US-led proxy war in Ukraine. It's a great paragraph. Gonna have to save that one for later. Just gonna bold that there. Emphasis added. Lacerdo invites us instead to contribute to the collective project of developing the rich tradition of critical communism. Such an orientation endeavors to learn practical lessons from the global history of class struggle, rather than seeking refuge in the realm of ideas and purported theoretical blueprints. This requires engaging in an ongoing process of learning and humble self-critique based on objective reality and the primacy of practice, thereby contributing to the difficult but necessary project of charting uncharted territory, namely that of collectively building and supporting a world of common prosperity. For Western Marxism, and the Western left more generally, to shift its orientation, such self-critique is absolutely necessary, and Lacerdo's work is an invaluable guide to this ideological realignment. Hell yeah. Air horns for that paragraph, too. In 1918, when the recently minted USSR was being invaded and the imperialist barbarians were literally at the gates, Lenin reached not for a gun, but for his pen. As if there were no more urgent task, which might seem shocking given the situation, he wrote a fiery reply to Karl Kautsky titled, "The Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky." Wow, that is hilarious. Like, I'm assuming he's going to explain in these next few sentences why that was the right thing to do at the time. I mean, obviously it was because the Russian Revolution was very successful, and so was the USSR. Um, but I do wonder if maybe he could have just done something else at the time. But that's so fucking funny because people always talk shit about how much Lenin hated Kautsky and devoted so much time just to shitting on him, to the point that like we only know about that guy and his thoughts because Lenin did that. Like nobody would have cared otherwise. From the vantage point of this peerless leader of the Russian Revolution, one of the most pressing tasks was to reorient the global communist movement away from Kautsky's social chauvinist support for imperialism. Okay, yeah. That one sentence explains why it was important to do that. This required engaging in class struggle in theory, fighting for the hearts and minds of the working and oppressed of the world, likely with the hope that the revolution would spread, or at a minimum, that the imperialist armies would lose some workers from their ranks. Yeah, I mean, I guess that is the ideal thing you could have happen is you materially affect the empire uh, detrimentally, like you materially negatively affect it and impede it. And if you can do that just by writing something and it convinces the workers who are materially helping it with their daily labor to stop doing that some way, awesome, great. That's like literally a big W. Although written in a very different context, Lacerdo's work is characterized by a similar urgency and accountability to the needs of the struggle. In a world facing intensifying capitalist degradation and imperialist barbarism, with the increasing threats of nuclear apocalypse and the thoroughgoing destruction of the biosphere. It forces us to reply to the same straightforward question posed by Lenin. Which side are you on? That of the imperialists and their well-paid ideological lackeys, or that of the people in their struggle for liberation and a sustainable world? Damn, maybe I actually just do have to read about the renegade Kautsky. It sounds like it's a very relevant critique to our situation because there's so many people who call themselves the most ardent, the most pure leftists, and again, they're just idealists, and they end up either implicitly or explicitly supporting imperialism because they don't have any kind of like solid analysis or critique of it. She says literally a death note. So this next section is notes from the translators and editors. Um, yeah, I believe I'm still in the intro, you guys. Like, I'm pretty sure I have not even gotten through the intro of this book, and this is now like day 5 of reading it 20 minutes at a time. Lacerdo's referencing system is somewhat idiosyncratic. The translators and editors were able to fill in certain gaps. The edition of the book cited missing page numbers, um, some unreferenced quotations. Generally, when an endnote occurs at the end of a paragraph, the quotations within that paragraph derive from the source cited in the note. In some places, the reverse is true. An endnote covers quotations in succeeding paragraphs. The context is critical in these cases. There are a few cases in which it was not possible to find the exact source. In most of these, the editors found a source that conveys the ideas expressed in the text, and they created an appropriate endnote. Okay, cool. And he acknowledges here, I was helped in the bibliographical research and correction to the text by Stefano Azzara, Paolo Ercolani, Elena Fabrizio, Giorgio Grimaldi, who edited the Index of Names, and Aldo Trotta. To all of them, my thanks. So now we're finally onto the premise. Yeah, I guess we're finally through the intro, guys. What is Western Marxism? This book takes its title from a 1976 book in which an English philosopher, Marxist, and communist, Trotskyist, militant invited, quote, Western Marxism to finally declare its total distinctness and independence from the caricature of Marxism in the officially socialist and Marxist countries, all of which were in the East. Okay. The Soviet Union was particularly targeted. There, notwithstanding the October Revolution in the example of Lenin, Marxism was by now, quote, a memory of the past. Stalin and, quote, collectivization had put, quote, an end to all serious theoretical work. Okay, that's a big claim, big if true. Nor did, quote, People's China come out much better. Okay, damn. This is why you cannot take these trots seriously. They just start off with like that kind of bullshit. So they're just like, you just write off these entire socialist projects because they're not living up to whatever theoretical ideal you imagine. That's fine. More power to you. To see it as an alternative model meant confirming the, quote, political heterogeneity of Western Marxism. The condemnation included the Western Communist parties characterized by their, quote, absolute loyalty to Soviet positions, and therefore were also de facto Eastern or Easternizing. Okay, so this is literally just a trot creating like a huge split. Okay, so that's why they're titling it that, because I guess, did I miss like who the author was? But this trot just like wrote a book called Western Marxism and said, dude, like unironically, Western Marxism should not support the Soviet Union or China or any of the Western communist parties that do support those. They're all bad. That sounds like the quintessential trot shit, to just create an entire divide that then sends the entire Western left on a wrong direction, self-satisfied that they are the correct ones for doing nothing at all. It's perfect trot shit. Go sell some newspapers. The indictment did not spare even the party of Gramsci and Togliatti, which had constantly wedded affirmation of the universal value of the October Revolution, with emphasis on the profound political and cultural differences between the East and the West, and so with theorizing the necessity of developing a national path to socialism, one adequate to needs of countries in the West. The English philosopher was implacable. Quote, no intellectual or worker within a mass communist party of this period, not integrated into its leadership, could make the smallest independent pronouncement on major political issues. And so, quote, the figure of Gramsci was converted into the official ideological icon of the party, invoked on every public occasion, while his actual writings were manipulated or neglected. How the obtuse guardians of an arid how the obtuse guardians of an arid cultural desert succeeded in attracting en masse fierce and sophisticated intellectuals, exercised an extraordinary influence and hegemony over Italian culture, and enjoyed great international prestige remains a mystery. Yeah, I mean, if you're following along with the Gladio book, not a mystery at all. The deep state, like the anti-communists, they control, like, that is the manufacturing consent that Chomsky always talks about. It's like you don't even get into the position of an academic or having a mouthpiece in the cultural or political movements unless you agree with the basic Western hegemonic positions of condemning existing socialist countries, existing and past socialist projects. Schiebel says, too long, didn't read should be the Ultras slogan. Yeah, they just literally do not understand the theory, let alone the praxis. Petrocell says, 19-year-olds thinking China should industrialize the whole Africa for free for it not to be imperialism is unreal. Yeah, but that's like literally what they believe. I advise you to go check out Internet International's page today. He's been off on one. I've been posting quotes from this book in the comments. Perry Anderson was not the first to note the divergence between Western and Eastern Marxism. Writing in the early years of the Cold War, an eminent French philosopher, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, observed, quote, the revolutionary politics which, in the perspective of 1917, was historically to take the place of, quote, liberal politics, occupied with difficult organizational problems, with defense and with improvements, it's really small here, has become more and more a politics for new countries, the means for semi-colonial countries, or for civilizations long since paralyzed, to change to modern modes of production. The immense apparatus that it constructed, with its disciplines and its privileges, at the moment that it shows itself to be efficacious for building an industry or for putting a new proletariat to work, evacuates the terrain of the proletariat as the ruling class and forfeits the mystery of civilization which, according to Marx, the Western proletariat carried. Yeah, I don't really. I think I'd have to read that a few more times to correctly parse it all. Maybe you guys can help me out in the chat and see what you took from that. But the previous year at Dien Bien Phu, the powerful army of colonialist France was soundly defeated by the Vietnamese movement and the People's Army led by the Communist Party. Everywhere in Asia, echoes rang of the strategic victory of anti-colonialism that had brought about the founding of the People's Republic of China. Yes, communism was revealed as the leading force of the anti-colonial revolution, and once in power, of the accelerated development of that quote the accelerated development that the quote semi-colonial economies urgently needed. These were undeniable results and successes, but asked the French philosopher, were they part of the communism that the quote Western proletariat had the historic mission of building, at least in the eyes of Marx and of Western Marxism? So is he asking, like, do the Westerners get to take credit for the actual revolution simply because a Westerner came up with the theory? Like, is that what I'm to take from this? I don't know. I'm going to read some more and see if there's some other message we should be getting from that. Here we encounter the expression Western Marxism for the first time. It was not, however, contrasted positively to the Eastern kind. If anything, only in the context of a complex critique of Marx and communism could, quote, Western Marxism constitute the principal object. Once the initial hopes for a radically new society and for the, quote, withering away of the state apparatus vanished, one conclusion emerged, quote, today's communism verges on progressivism, and progressivism cannot ignore the concrete conditions of the country or the area in which political action takes place. Done once and for all with the messianic prospect of the total regeneration of humanity, it was necessary to go on a case-by-case basis. Quote, where there is a choice between famine and the communist apparatus, the decision in favor of the latter goes without saying. It seems obvious to me. Yeah, I would agree with that. I support the revolution that feeds the children, right? And probably for the French philosopher, the decision went without saying when it was between the colonial subjection and anti-colonial revolution, especially led by the communists. The West, however, presented a very different picture. Was the communist revolution really necessary and beneficial, and what would be its concrete results? So yeah, I mean, I guess that is probably one of the core premises of the Western Marxists is to always question the revolution, question whether it was necessary, and question whether it's better than the colonial situation. And then doing that from within the spot that benefits from that colonialism continuing. Okay, so yeah, I'm at 40 minutes for this one. Or I'm at 20 minutes for this one, so 40 minutes for the stream. So I'm going to bookmark it. Next, we'll pick up tomorrow. It says this stance had many weaknesses. Yeah, you definitely say that. Okay, and now I'm going to switch over to the third book. This is The Busy Worker's Handbook to the Apocalypse by I think it was Eric Hall. I can't remember. Pretty sure the last guy's name is Hall. So we're on to section 5, temperature projections. Again, this is the quick and dirty book to understanding the climate apocalypse as it's happening. So 5.1 trajectory. The most important paper published in recent years is James Hansen's Global Warming in the Pipeline from December 2022. Hansen, with 14 co-authors, including Leon Simons, who have also quoted frequently, published this paper before it completed peer review, making the full paper immediately available to the public. I take this as an indication of the extreme urgency of the message within. Now, I feel like you got to take that with a grain of salt, right? Like if somebody sends a paper off to peer review and then also publishes the entire paper at the same time before it gets any kind of peer review process, you can definitely take that as an indictment of the peer review process and saying like, look, I don't trust the peer review process. I feel like something in that process is going to censor some of this data or misconvey the message because it's in their interest as an establishment to do that. But all of the right can also say that. They can literally just like publish a fascist paper and say, well, I'm publishing all of it as well as sending it off to peer review because I feel like they're going to censor my fascist bullshit. It's like, just saying. I don't think this is the case here. I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily lend it more credibility just because you self-publish as well as sending it off to peer review. So, quote, improved knowledge of glacial to interglacial global temperature change implies that fast feedback equilibrium climate sensitivity is at least around 4 degrees Celsius for doubled CO2, with likely range 3.5 to 5.5 degrees Celsius. Global warming in the pipeline is greater than prior estimates. So I guess it's already locked in. Eventual global warming due to today's GHG forcing alone, after slow feedbacks operate, is about 10 degrees Celsius. Note that Hansen's likely range for ECS is entirely above the IPCC's value of 3 degrees Celsius. The paper states flatly, the IPCC AR6 conclusion that 3 degrees Celsius is the best estimate for ECS is inconsistent with paleoclimate data. The importance of this cannot be overstated. If we end all CO2 emissions today, the Earth will warm by at least 4 degrees by 2100 and by 10 degrees Celsius over the next 1,000 plus years. Remember, CDR, which I believe is carbon capture, CDR is impossible. We cannot build the machinery to remove CO2 from the atmosphere at the scale required to make a difference. We are committed to these temperature increases. I guess the only thing that could happen is like some kind of mass planting of trees and reseeding of like algae in the oceans to like actually do carbon capture. But again, not being proposed, let alone implemented by any kind of body that could do that on the mass scale needed. Going back to the previous topic of fast versus slow feedbacks, the paper states, quote, most climate models are unrealistically insensitive to fresh water injected by melting ice, and also that ice sheet models are unrealistically lethargic in the face of rapid, large climate change. So yeah, they're just basically overly optimistic to the point of being quite literally delusional about the situation. I can make this session much longer by quoting extensively from the paper, but I'll attempt to keep it short and just recommend that everyone should read at least Hansen's December update, if not the full pipeline paper. Now, I'm certain that's going to be linked somewhere here in this document. Again, the link to this document and then therefore the links to all the other things he's referencing are going to be in the description on the YouTube channel. You can all read along with or read ahead. Let me just take a second again to check the chat, see if anybody's got anything going on. Petricel says, yes, I know a Maoist who didn't read shit from Mao and doesn't know shit about Mao besides the Cultural Revolution, and they think it was a success. It hasn't even been half a year since they were asking me the difference between Marxism-Leninism and Marxism-Leninism Maoism, and now they try to lecture me about how I'm a revisionist. And Shibboleth says, I would like to remind liberals that Ip Man was fighting Imperial Japan and the United States from cultural domination. Interesting. So back to this climate book here. If we do some simple projections based off of what we know so far, we're looking at 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2024, over 2 degrees Celsius by 2050, 3 degrees Celsius by 2075, and at least 4 degrees Celsius by 2100. This is what everyone should be planning for. These are global average temperatures, and it is important to emphasize that land warms faster than water, and the Northern Hemisphere has less water than the Southern Hemisphere, so the Northern Hemisphere warms faster than the Southern Hemisphere. When we say 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming, we're talking about 2.2 degrees Celsius on land in the Northern Hemisphere, with regional variances meaning some particularly vulnerable areas may warm more than others. There's some graphs that go along with this here. They're just, generally 45-degree angles trending upwards for temperatures over the course of 1880 to 2020. Not good, folks, not good. I find myself saying that a lot reading through this book. Every time I look at one of these charts and try to relay it in audio format, it's like line go up. That's all it is line go up. Reminder, these numbers are based on current CO2 levels already in the atmosphere, as calculated in section 2.1, allowing even 9 more years of steady emissions worsens the situation by about 15%, 12 years by 20%, and 15 years by 25%. Again, all of those are still so far on the books. Like that is the plan so far. No one's curbing emissions, except for China. Will Steffen gave some context for 4 degrees Celsius of warming in this short lecture extract. 4 degrees Celsius is the same difference in temperature as from the last ice age to the present. We're talking about a shift as big as between an ice age when mastodons and woolly mammoths were around and humans barely survived. We're talking about the same difference, but not in 5,000 years, in 1 century. In my view, it is impossible to survive that sort of change. That's beyond human physiology. In fact, large mammals as a whole will not do very good. That's a collapse scenario because physiologically, we can't survive that. That was all like a quote, that last paragraph, sorry. And then it says the following paragraph was added July 11th, 2023. Subsequent to publication of this article, Hansen has been frantically attempting to calm the outcries sparked by his pipeline paper, saying that temperatures in the paper are, quote, not committed. Hansen says, quote, not committed because he still believes net zero is possible. Okay, that's wild. Why, like, one of the biggest criticisms of, like, this paper that I'm reading so far has been that the IPCC is unrealistic because their baseline assumptions start with, like, net zero being possible by something like 2050. Like, that's literally where they're starting from. So I guess wild that he references and lends so much credibility to Hansen, who believes that. Maybe he just believes it's further. I don't know. We're going to continue reading and see if he explains further. The argument goes that ECS or ESS values are computed based on constant atmospheric CO2e concentrations, and that after net zero has been achieved, the natural sink drawdown mechanisms discussed in section 4.3.2 will cause atmospheric CO2 concentrations to go down, therefore lowering the temperature trajectory. Hansen gets the climate science right, but everything else wrong. Net zero is not possible. Okay, so there you go. Further, it is important to remember that the 4 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius temperatures in the pipeline paper are calculated based on current GHG levels, greenhouse gas levels, as of the end of 2022, and emissions have still not leveled off. In the years between now and civilizational collapse, collapse, we will likely emit far more greenhouse gases than any post-collapse natural sink drawdown could negate. Okay, so factoring in the fact that like as people die off in mass numbers, less greenhouse gases will be emitted, but this is still factoring that in, like everything he's saying. There is no question that 4 degrees Celsius by 2100 is locked in. Hansen's faith in net zero is not remotely realistic. Oof. Not good, folks. Not good. So that was section 5.1. Section 5.2, rate of change. The primary message of this section is that the temperature projections just made in section 5.1 are a simplistic representation of change. Real change may not happen smoothly, but can arrive in sudden, catastrophic bursts. These bursts will happen on top of a baseline warming rate already much faster than we are used to from recent history. In an update from August 2021, Hansen writes, quote, "We should expect the global warming rate for the quarter of a century, 2015 to 2040, to be about double the 0.18 degrees Celsius per decade rate during 1970 to 2015. Okay, so that's the rate of warming that occurred from 1970 to 2015. It was 0.18 degrees Celsius per decade. And so now we're going to experience double that from 2015 to 2040. Unless appropriate countermeasures are taken. So far, they have not been. The chart below comes from another update from December 2022. Again, it's just another 45-degree line go up chart. And then at the end, it projects just an even steeper incline from 2020 to 2040. Like it literally just raises the 45-degree pitch to like 65 degrees. This very recent study, just published in April 2023, found that over the last 20 years, the atmosphere is warming 4 times as fast as the period from 1961 to 2000. It links to a discussion by Simons here. We know that EEI is a measurement of the speed of warming. Below is a look at EEI over the past 22 years. So again, this is another just line go up chart. It's got peaks and valleys, but the overall trend is that same 45-degree angle. The biggest factor in influencing the near-term warming rate is the elimination of air pollution, specifically SOx. In a scenario where industrial civilization collapses, the aerosol cooling effect could disappear, resulting in massive warming of 0.5 to 1 degree Celsius within 1 to 2 years. And again, that's something that people keep talking about, like the climate scientists, is the aerosol masking effect, is that because humans produce so many aerosols, those actually negate some of the they like reflect some of the heat and the sun coming into the atmosphere. And so if there are major bursts of catastrophe that kill off massive amounts of humans and stop those aerosols being produced because people are just not making and buying things, that causes like another significant and sudden uptick in warming. So those are these bad feedback loops that they're talking about. This 2014 AGU presentation by Dr. Jim White of the Institute of Arctic and Alpine Research at University of Colorado Boulder focuses on abrupt change, leading off with a message that, quote, "In adapting to change, speed kills." At 13 minutes and 30, up until the 1990s, we thought of climate change as mostly gradual, forced primarily by sun-Earth changes. Greenland ice cores and ocean sediment cores changed that view. His research indicates that study sites in Greenland experienced past abrupt change of 5 to 10 degrees Celsius within a single year. Yeah, that's not going to be good. That's like the kind of stuff where you cannot grow food. Like massive amounts of people will die because you'll have massive crop failures across the world. And they're showing these charts of these ice cores where you have like these massive, they're just like huge shifts. And they happen very quickly and then lasted for a very long time. On top of Arctic Ocean ice, Dr. White states at 24 minutes and 40, what you have now is an Arctic Ocean that is largely made up of 1, 2, 3-year ice, and that's very different from an Arctic Ocean made up of multi-year ice. 1 to 2-year ice is something that can change rapidly. This is a system that has been set up for abrupt change. Yeah, I mean, needless to say, I think at this point that abrupt change regarding the climate and then survivability of that climate, that's not good. You don't want abrupt change. Another recent study found, quote, ice sheets can collapse into the ocean in spurts of up to 600 meters, or 2,000 feet a day. Some ice sheets in Antarctica, including the Doomsday Thwaites Glacier, could suffer periods of rapid collapse in the near future. Our findings suggest that present-day rates of melting are sufficient to cause short pulses of rapid retreat across flat-bedded areas of the Antarctic ice sheet, including at Thwaites. Okay, so just a massive melting of, and like the water coming from the glaciers is, again, they say it's bad. It was referenced earlier in the paper. I just can't remember exactly why. The past abrupt melting events resulted from CO2 increases tremendously slower than CO2 emission rates today, which are rising faster than any event in Earth's history. Not good. The steady rate of warming is becoming faster and sudden. Catastrophic warming events are absolutely possible. It is dangerously wrong to assume that future warming will be anything like recent past warming. We cannot assume that we have time to adequately prepare for future warming, or that we can simply deal with events as they unfold. Yeah, I think that's a pretty clear summation of the overall the message of like these past couple of sections. Tired Eye says, so climate change is like the Giga Chad in the situation, and humanity is the angry crying soy jack. Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Everyone will continue to live in this nothing ever happens zone because they're already conveniently ignoring the deaths caused by climate change. And everyone will just be nothing ever happens until it is literally you experiencing it. Oh yeah, acid glacier water. Is that what the problem is, Shibbles? But yeah. He says in the chat, here's another, and it's like the emoji for line go up. He's like, here's another graph up death. Yeah. Basically. How long am I going with this one? Okay, I'll do 4 more minutes. I'm almost at an hour, you guys. So just to read another little bit of this section 6. Vulnerabilities. 6.1. Risk assessment. The graphic below is taken from this 2022 study titled, quote, Exploring Catastrophic Climate Change Scenarios, and correctly highlights the focal role of food, water, and fuel as the metaphorical gallows trapdoor upon which civilization incuriously rests. Okay, so yeah, food, water, and fuel. That's the thing. Yeah, the metaphorical gallows trapdoor. That's cool. I like that. The paper points out, quote, the IPCC has yet to give focused attention to catastrophic climate change. 14 special reports have been published. None covered extreme or catastrophic climate change. From the conclusions section, quote, there is ample evidence that climate change could become catastrophic. We could enter such, quote, end games as event at even modest levels of warming. Understanding extreme risks is important for robust decision making, from preparation to consideration of emergency responses. This requires exploring not just higher temperature scenarios, but also the potential for climate change impacts to contribute to systemic risk and other cascades. Facing a future of accelerating climate change while blind to worst case scenarios is naive risk management at best and fatally foolish at worst. So emphasis added to that last part there. Yeah, I mean, I want to find the tweet. I'm gonna have to like look through my screenshots because I just screenshot hundreds of things a day. But there was someone who tweeted something like, "I think that the climate change scenario is far worse than any of the public outlets are saying, and that a lot of the decisions that seem to be nonsensical or foolhardy by governments and world bodies are reflecting that scenario. Like they're making the moves that are planning to let massive amounts of people die and then prepare for that scenario rather than what they're publicly saying they're preparing for." Again, like I'm messing up and butchering the wording, but it was something to that effect. So we have another handy graphic here. Global warming cascades down to sea level rise, extreme weather events, economic inequality, displacement, international and local conflict, vector-borne diseases, mortality, state fragility, biodiversity and ecosystem services degrading. All depends on food, fuel, and water shortages or resource scarcity. The caption here says, Figure 3, Cascading Global Climate Failure. This is a causal loop diagram in which a complete line represents a positive polarity, e.g. amplifying feedback, not necessarily positive in a normative sense, and a dotted line denotes a negative polarity, meaning a dampening of feedback. Okay, so it's a lot more complicated than I was just describing. There's different directions of these lines. You just have to see it to understand it. But in What Lies Beneath, the authors write, the World Bank reports quote, there is no certainty that adaptation to a 4 degrees Celsius world is possible. So yeah, it may just be that there is no ability to grow food. Like you just have a worldwide desert and oceans. A 2017 survey of global catastrophic risks by the Global Challenges Foundation found that, quote, in high-end climate scenarios, the scale of destruction is beyond our capacity to model, with a high likelihood of human civilization coming to an end. In the IPCC lexicon, future outcomes are considered, quote, unlikely if they lie outside the central 67% of the probability distribution. For many types of risk assessment, however, a 33% chance of occurrence would be very high, emphasis added. So I'm going to bookmark it here, but basically, they're saying in that last paragraph, like they just do not even have some of the models or ability to plot out these scenarios or predict them. And then some of the ways that they use to do so, they rule out things if they seem like they're egregiously, um, drastically different from the current scenario. And they can't imagine how we get there. It's like he's outlining how the models and the baseline assumptions of these organizations prevent them from being able to understand, let alone tell everyone how to prepare for these scenarios. So, not good, folks. Not good. Not good. All right. I'm going to, like I said, bookmark it there. But again, you can go to youtube.com/ at TCOTE pod. And then if you look in like the live section, you will find in the description of the videos, you'll find all these past ones that I did. I'm putting them in a playlist called Reading Hours. I can send that to you if you like. But that link will be in the Discord. If it's not already there, I'll post it later. And yeah, you can check all these reading hours and keep up with these books. Again, it's Unholy Alliance by Paul L. Williams, Western Marxism, Domenico Lacerdo and Gabriel Rockhill, and The Busy Worker's Handbook to the Apocalypse. So thanks again for joining, guys. I'll try to do this again tomorrow. See you guys.